Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing. So today's question is on dumping. I opened up this question for thought yesterday. We will discuss this question tomorrow. The question is clearly very simple in that it is clearly telling you what it wants you to talk about. Like for example, this is not an interpretation based question where there are several interpretations possible, but this is a question in which you can clearly delineate the side headings. What is dumping? First side heading. Remedial measures, second side heading. Our remedial measures in the context of WTO provisions, third side heading if possible. Right. So this is how you can diversify or decipher or dissect your answer. But what is dumping as such? Dumping is basically a term used in economics. It is a type of predatory pricing. Now what is predatory pricing? Predatory pricing is a situation in which maybe I am a company and I am selling my good at a very cheap price. When I sell a good at a very cheap price, it is automatic that a lot of people are going to buy it. But of course, my good has a decent quality. So a lot of people are going to buy it, and after some time, these people are going to buy this good in huge amounts because it is being made available cheap. So there is a kind of dependency that I am creating between my good and the people as such, and that is what in fact China is doing, right? Why do we have so much of trade deficit with China? Because we have total inclination towards Chinese goods. We buy these electronic goods, we buy their TVs, mobile phones and so on, right? So when we do this and we do it in a big manner, we have a huge trade deficit with China to the tune of 60 to 65 billion dollars. And that is possible because there is a situation of dependency, and China is dumping its goods in the country, not in the context of electronic items. But when dumping happens, China usually dumps iron ore and so on. It sells its iron ore at a cheap price, and when it is selling its iron ore at a cheap price, what do people in India do? What people in India do is, these people don't buy domestic iron ore. They start buying iron ore from China simply because it is cheap. And this creates a situation of dependency, first thing. Secondly, it is going to shore up the trade deficit or the current account deficit. Thirdly, it is going to, of course, help China. But domestically, it is going to hurt us. Domestically, our resources are not harnessed. If the resources in the country are harnessed, then what happens is we will be able to generate employment and so on. But anyway, we have established that dumping is going to hurt the economy which receives the dumped goods. So WTO, which is a body, WTO as a body is going to take care of what? WTO helps in creating a situation of free and fair trade. So it has to handle or tackle the situation of dumping. So in order to do this, WTO has given certain measures, right? So what are these measures? And you have to talk about Indian government's measures in that context. So what is my introduction, body and conclusion format? In the introduction, I talk about dumping. I simply define dumping. And then moving forward, I talk about the body of my answer, which is going to talk about the remedial measures that is going to be taken by the government. This is going to be my second side heading, B. But the first side heading is going to talk about the impact. He has not asked about it specifically, but if you talk about the impact, you can clearly establish to the examiner that this is the kind of negativity dumping spreads in an economy. And once you do that, you move forward, talk about India's measures, and you briefly talk about WTO's provisions that are present. So these are the two things that you can talk about under this particular answer, and moving forward, you can conclude. So the first and foremost thing that you have to establish to the examiner that dumping is an unfair trade practice. And this is an unfair trade practice simply because it has a very distortive effect on international trade. So in order to handle this situation, anti-dumping is the remedy. Anti-dumping is a measure to rectify the situation arising out of dumping of goods and the kind of effect it has on an economy, right? So we want to establish or re-establish a situation of fair trade, which is why WTO has allowed for anti-dumping duties. So in addition to the anti-dumping duties of WTO, what does a domestic economy do? What can a domestic economy do in order to handle the situation, right? So let's move forward, look at the sample answer. So here's your sample answer. Dumping is said to occur when the goods are exported at lower than market price to other countries. This is an unfair trade practice simply because it has a distortive effect on international trade. These are the key words that I want you to keep in mind: distortive effect and so on, because that is going to help you to write more in less space. So he is giving you a schematic of dumping. Country A is basically the country that is dumping the goods. So this is the movement of good flow. The goods are going to country B. So country B is going to have all the negative impacts. Country B is going to have all the positive impacts. So country A captures the market. Secondly, because it is dumping the goods, it is going to earn some money, right? But of course, it is not going to earn enough money because dumping is basically done at a predatory price, at a cheaper price. So the amount of returns you get is quite less. But that is actually a myth. When you dump the goods, you're dumping those goods which are basically in oversupply in your own economy. In your own economy, you don't know where to sell. You just have a storage of these goods and you want to sell them. So you at least sell them at a cheaper price so that you at least earn some money, get that foreign exchange, invest that foreign exchange somewhere and earn interest, right? So that is something that you can do. So this helps the dumping or the country which is dumping to capture the market, and in fact it is doing it not because it is doing it because of its free will. It is doing it because it wants to capture the market, and secondly it wants to tap the potential of the higher production in its own country. It earns forex rate, as in foreign exchange, boosts the domestic industry and generates wealth. In addition to this, the country B has the negative impacts, like domestic goods are no longer purchased. People start going for the dumped goods simply because they are cheaper, and then people prefer these cheaper dumped goods and the local economy faces losses, right? So this is the kind of schematic he is trying to tell you, as in the impact of dumping on the country which is dumping and on the country in which the goods are being dumped. So let's move forward. So to handle the situation amicably, WTO basically has certain measures to prevent dumping. Firstly, you have the situation of anti-dumping duty. So whenever there is a realization that a particular country is dumping its goods all over the world, those countries who are being affected adversely by the situation of dumping, these countries can take to a particular measure called anti-dumping duty. So what is an anti-dumping duty? So whenever there is an incoming good into your country, you have to pay that good you have to pay extra price in order to purchase that good. See, that particular country, as in China, is selling the good at a cheaper price, but if it has to enter the country, it has to pay a tax called anti-dumping duty. Then what happens if I am an Indian and I want to purchase a Chinese iron ore product? What happens is I have to pay the price of its product which has been decided by China. In addition to this, I also have to pay the anti-dumping duty, and thus that makes it costly for me. So instead of buying the Chinese iron ore, what I'll do is I'll go and find my iron ore producer somewhere inside the country close by, buy it from him, right? So this is going to decrease the imports from China. So anti-dumping duty is a leveler. Anti-dumping duty is basically helping the economy, right? So moving forward, you have quota restrictions, transparent pricing of goods. So when there is a proper transparent pricing of goods, we will clearly know if the good that is being sold at a cheap, very cheap price. Like for example, China says that this is the market value of a good, please take it. But if you look at the cost of production, you see that the cost of production is high, but the goods price is low. So you can clearly know if these values, as in if these figures of cost of production and the final product price, all these things are available, then you can clearly say if that pricing is predatory pricing. You can clearly see if that particular country is trying to simply dump its goods in your market. And then principle of free and fair trade. This is basically a bedrock of WTO's working. And then you have to prevent artificial devaluation, because artificial devaluation or currency exchange devaluation is going to lead to a situation in which you can dump easily, as in you can increase the exports, and at the same time the flip side is it is going to lead to a situation of currency exchange war, right? So these are the WTO measures against dumping. So what are Indian measures in this particular context? So Directorate General of Anti-Dumping (DGAD) recommends duties in addition to anti-dumping duties. Sometimes anti-dumping duties might not be sufficient, so you also have to levy the additional duties. But this has to be done in a reasonable manner. But because otherwise, what happens is China will immediately take us to WTO court. So lodging grievances with WTO every now and then, telling the WTO as an organization that look, this country is not following transparent pricing norms. It's good that it is being priced at a very cheap rate, and it is leading to a situation of domestic economy collapse for me. So please take a look into it. So these kind of grievance redressal can be done by WTO, and these cases can be filed against that particular country or the country which dumps the goods in WTO. India is doing that. So moving forward, it is boosting the local economy, right? Boosting the local economy to local industry to support production of cheaper goods like Make in India, credit schemes, example Mudra, logistic developments, and so on. So what it is trying to tell you is, on one hand, you will try and prevent goods from China to come into India, but there is a limit to it. How much of anti-dumping duty will you levy? How much of extra taxes will you levy? There is a limit to it, right? So instead, what you do is you basically improve the situation in your own economy. You create a situation in your country such that the people, as in the firms in your country, are producing the goods at a very cheap rate. They are able to produce a good at a competitive rate. When a mobile phone is produced in the country at a competitive price on par with a Chinese good, why will people buy Chinese good? They will most likely go for an Indian good if it is cheaper, right? The main signal of economic behavior is price, right? Starting from Adam Smith to today, everybody is talking about economics in terms of money, because the signal of economics is, signal of behavior of people in economics is money or the price. And if this price is offered at a competitive rate domestically, why will people buy Chinese goods? They won't, right? And that is the situation we are trying to create. And in order to do so, we are going for programs like Make in India, credit schemes, Mudra, logistic developments, and so on. So you have to, of course, analyze this particular situation in the context of WTO. So you have been taking up so many measures. Firstly, you are going for Make in India, logistics improvement, and so on. In addition, you have set up Directorate General of Anti-Dumping. You're also lodging complaints against China in situations where you feel that goods are being dumped in your economy. But having said all that, what is the evaluation? What is the critical evaluation on these steps that India has taken? Firstly, these have not been very effective. Like for example, we have not been able to prevent dumping altogether. Iron ore is still dumped by China, and not just India but also in Southeast Asia. In addition to this, the very evidence that there is a burgeoning trade deficit tells you that we are not handling the situation better. In addition to this, rise in trade disputes on the justiciability of the duty levied. So whenever we levy the duty, China usually questions it, and sometimes it takes an issue to the WTO, says that this particular country is levying too much of anti-dumping duty or additional duty, and this again is leading to a situation of conflict. Alright, so moving forward, India must further evolve a rule-based approach instead of levying ad hoc duties, right? In addition to anti-dumping duty, ऐसा नहीं है कि आज अच्छा नहीं लगा है तो मैं ड्यूटी लगा देता हूँ. So we can't do things like that. You are supposed to have a rule-based approach with the support of other developing countries to make the dumping fight more effective. So this question in fact is a below average answer because there are certain crucial points that he has not written. The points are quite generic. There are no solid points under this. Of course, he has addressed every side heading well, but there is a lot that could have been written. I wanted to talk about these in the comment section, right? Additional points, and this is probably going to be important for your mains in this year also, because the situation of dumping, the situation of WTO is every now and then in the newspaper, right? Now let's move forward, open up the question for tomorrow. So here is the question for tomorrow: how important are vulnerability and risk assessment for pre-disaster management? As an administrator, what are the key areas that you would focus in disaster management system? So there is one crucial thing that I want you to notice in this particular question. First thing it is asking you is to talk about the importance of vulnerability assessment in pre-disaster management. So the first part of the question is about pre-disaster management. You have to keep that in mind. The second part of the question is about the whole disaster management cycle. It is not asking you to talk about the steps that you would take in a pre-disaster management situation, but it is asking you to talk about all the steps that you would take in order to manage the situation of disaster, right? So that is the question. Think about this question, evolve the side headings that you would like to. We'll discuss the question tomorrow. Thank you.